All right. Well, I want to say good morning to everyone, including our attendees and our speakers, and welcome you to this Friday morning concurrent session number 5. This is the People and Policy Action and Updates stream this morning, if you're joining us. My name is Jen McNelly, and I'm the Water Resource Specialist for Portage County, and I'll be moderating the session this morning. As we get started, if you have questions for the presenters this morning, please feel free to drop those into the chat box at the right-hand side of the screen. I'll be watching that chat box throughout the presentation. We'll come back and we'll hopefully have some time to answer those questions after we finish up this morning. We'll kick things off with the session, Effective Communications in a Distracted Age, Why Lake Organizations Need to Optimize Electronic Communications, which seems a very appropriate topic given everything that we're dealing with in this day and age. Our presenters this morning are Karen Reynolds, with the LakeKit Steering Committee member, and Mike Engleson, the Executive Director of Wisconsin Lakes. Prior to accepting the executive director role in 2013, Mike came to Wisconsin Lakes as a membership and communications director in 2009. A graduate of Lakeitnet University in Appleton and UW-Madison Law School, Mike gained a great deal of experience with nonprofit organizations while in school. He served as an intern with 1,000 Friends of Wisconsin, during which time he helped rural towns write ordinances implementing their land use plans. After a short stint as a general practice attorney, he spent 6 years working for the River Alliance of Wisconsin before coming to Wisconsin Lakes. He has served on the boards of several nonprofit organizations, including Prairie Music and Arts, the Tenant Resource Center of Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin Community Fund, and is a graduate of Lawrence University in Appleton. So welcome this morning.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you everybody for joining us so early on a Friday morning here online. We were joking for those of you that have attended the convention in the past and stayed at the Holiday Inn. I had a English muffin, egg and cheese sandwich this morning that tasted almost homemade. It was so good. So we wanted the title of our talk, as Jen said, is Effective Communications in a Distracted Age. And this is being presented by a program of Wisconsin Lakes called LakeKit Net, which we'll get into in a little bit. It's a program that helps lake organizations develop and maintain websites through sort of an innovative way that we can offer it to you for extremely low cost compared to what you would pay on the open market. And Karen will be getting into that in a little bit. We came up with this idea for this talk about why electronic communication strategy is important months ago, not knowing that it would become probably even more important with the health crisis that we have. And so though these slides aren't necessarily optimized for that point, I'll try to modify my talk a little bit and make some interjections as to where I think I can point out places where this is really something that's important. So we'll dive right in. Let's start talking about how communications for organizations has developed over time. So of course, we really all started back even just 15, 20 years ago, using pretty much just paper communications other than in-person meetings and things like that. So print newsletters, flyers, membership mailings. The amount of information you could get out was limited by the amount of time it took to create and produce the print item. And you could only do so many things, and it's somewhat limited what you were able to do as far as communicating, but it was what, of course, people were used to. Then we got emails and websites, and we started to begin to move into this era of more communications, more frequent communications, sometimes more detailed communications, but just a much higher volume of communications from all sources, sometimes things that you wanted to hear from. And as we know with email spam, oftentimes things that we don't want to hear from. I looked at my email box, which I've been keeping up with as much as I could this week. It was already up to, hundreds of messages, probably hundreds of which I will just hit the delete button on, because they're not anything that's relevant or that I asked to see. And then we, a few years ago, decade or so ago, entered this world of social media, which has changed things even more in the way we communicate, in the speed that information moves around. It, in many ways, has sort of changed the, I would say, the generational gap between how younger people and maybe older people who have not adopted social media as much, or at least didn't grow up with it and sort of have it baked into their own being as to how they communicate. There are all of these things that have sort of percolated around, and now we come to this point where we're not able to go to meetings. We have to do conventions online, and we'll probably be doing so for a good chunk of time. And even once we come out of it, it's going to probably have changed the way we look at large gatherings, and even just the efficiency of having large gatherings versus something like that. So understanding and being prepared to have some sort of electronic communication strategy, even as a very small lake association, I think is something that's really important. And we tend, I think, to think of these things as individual pieces. So we have our website and we do certain things on the website, and we send out emails and we do certain things with the email, and maybe we have a Facebook page, and they do all have their individual point. But I want us to start thinking, uh, as individual organizations and as a Lakes community, that what if we really thought about how all of these pieces of communication work together and how they can strengthen the message that you're trying to get across, by thinking about them that way strategically. So I've sort of somewhat arbitrarily divided the different communication pieces up into these 4 nodes of this network. So you've got your website, you've got email communications, you've got social media, and you've got non-electronic, which is really everything that's not electronic. So I'd include both paper communications and the kind of in-person meetings and stuff. But the way to think about it is not, if this orange diamond in the center is the audience that you're talking to, I wouldn't think about it as just how does that audience react with social media, but you can see if you network all of these things together, the audience is going to get stuff from social media that's connected to the website, and you can go all the way around the circle. And we'll get into why and how that can work well for you. So you can see on this slide, I've got the font for website a little bit larger than the font for these other ones, and that was intentional. At Wisconsin Lakes and at LakeKit.net, we've sort of decided that the website itself is a pretty good foundation to start your network on. That's not necessarily going to be true for every organization. That's not a hard and fast rule. There may be some groups where the website is just something that is not going to be used, and if it happens to be a population that's very social media savvy, for instance, there's a way that you could weight social media much more heavily in this network. But I do believe that all of these pieces together can be useful in most instances. But we're going to talk maybe partially because LakeKit.net is a website, ultimately a program that does websites. We're going to talk a bit more about websites than the others this morning. So why do we think websites are a good foundation to start with? Well, they give lots of different ways that you can organize the information that you want to use. Used to be, websites were very static. You put up a page, and that page pretty much lived like that for as long as until you took that page down. And so the information that you would find on websites and when they first started in the late 90s and early 2000s didn't really change a whole lot. So it was almost like an electronic set of print advertisements for a company or an organization. But the software has become so much more robust and so much easier for the user, for you, the person that may not even know how to do coding. You don't need to do that kind of stuff anymore. You can make websites very robust and vibrant and changeable. And so there are multiple ways to organize. You can make things searchable, so somebody can go to your website and type in a keyword into the search box and they can find all of the information on the site that's relating to that. Websites work as a really great place to store documents that you either want your members or the public even to be able to access. So many lake organizations, especially lake districts, will have links to copies of meeting minutes or budgets or other you often see a link to the entire lake management plan up there. It might be that those links don't get clicked on very often, and it's not heavily used, but it might be a requirement that for a grant or sometimes by government regulation that their information is accessible. And this is a pretty good way to do it. If you get into things with LakeKit.net, I probably won't get into it this morning, but we're trying to come up with some ways that people can have use the cloud, so internet storage, in a way that works really well for your website, but is also a way that your organization can store documents over the long term. Websites are accessible. Everybody really pretty much understands how they work for the most part. And as I said, you have a lot more control over content and how that changes than you did in the past. And one way that happens is through the idea of posts. So we used to have, as I said, these sort of static pages. Then a decade or so ago, people started to use blogs. So the idea with a blog is it's almost, I think it was originally conceived of as sort of an online journal. So you write periodically, and the posts were not necessarily meant to last for a long period of time. But this idea that you could post things on websites instead of building these more permanent pages has sort of taken root. And it's a really powerful way to get a lot of content up onto a site quickly and still have it. You can still go in and update those posts. They're searchable. There's multiple ways that you can sort of tag them so that people, if they search, like if you go to wisconsinlakes.org and search on Wisconsin Lakes Convention, you'll get a bunch of posts that we did on the Lakes Convention. So the blog concept has sort of exploded into and weaned its way into some other what looked like just regular pages, but actually might be posts. Another example of this that I think we're probably going to be doing on wisconsinlakes.org in the near future is we'll have a page just on aquatic invasive species information that will display all the posts that we put in into our blog, but it'll put them up on a page that that sort of collates and curates all of those into a place where you can go and you can look at everything that we've posted and information we've gotten on AIS. And this last bullet point on this slide is sort of the theme of how I'm looking at this whole electronic communication strategy. Posts are where you tell your whole story. If you're using this full 4-piece network of different communication nodes, everything else that you do is probably just a teaser that somehow links you to that post on the website. And the advantage of that, again, is that with the website post, it can be longer. There's no character limit like you would have on a Twitter post. Long stories in email end up kind of being hard to read. So this is just a place where you can sort of make everything look consistent. You have a little more space to play with. The other places then kind of point back to that post. and I'll get to that as we move on. So let's talk a little bit about websites in particular. And I kind of intentionally entitled this slide, "Why a WordPress CMS Website?" so that people would go, what the heck is a WordPress CMS website? Because one of the barriers I find from groups adopting this sort of stuff is that there's always jargon that really usually has multisyllabic words that don't really mean a whole lot, and oftentimes there are abbreviations. So WordPress is just the platform that we've decided to use. It's the software that lets us create the websites. Open sourced content management system. To be honest, I don't even know that I could give you a really concise definition of exactly what that means. But I think the important takeaway from it is that it's a way to do content that is available to everyone. So it's not proprietary. There's not, some board of directors of 6 people that are saying that we're going to control how this stuff is done. It's open to the community to figure out how to use, which makes it more transparent, probably usually safer actually, and it's sort of the way most electronic stuff is moving. So WordPress powers over 60 million websites and has become the most popular content management system. Like most website systems, you store your content like text and images, and you can easily create and publish different web pages. But one nice thing about WordPress is it is very device agnostic. So it works well whether you're looking at it on a 52-inch TV screen, on a laptop screen, or on your mobile phone. If you have it set up right, which we do at LakeKit, it'll optimize to whatever device it is that you're looking at and the kind of screen you're using. I'll go really quickly through what a website page generally looks like, and then I think the next slide we get to turn things over to Karen, who will talk a little bit more about how we do it at LakeKit.net and show you some of the features that we have there. So a website page, this is generally what they look like. This is sort of a basic example of what the way we conceive of things at LakeKit. So your header and your footer are pretty much the same on every page that you go to. It gives the organization information and all that kind of stuff. You can put whatever you want in a footer. It's a great place to have again, the kind of, maybe you have links to contact information or an address, any kind of messaging that doesn't necessarily need to be in the pretty header can go down in the footer. The nav bar lets you move things around. And if you think back to websites that you've experienced in the past, the old design, sometimes the navigation bar is where your menus will be, where you click on it. It might be a pull down that'll take you to different pages. Used to be that sometimes they were on the left, sometimes they were on the right. Because of mobile phones, this is really the layout that we found that works the best, because there's not a lot of real estate on a mobile phone screen or even on a tablet to do things on the left or the right. So as much as you can align stuff vertically, you still have all of this room for main content, and then you might have the main content screen broken up into a couple of columns. And we'll show some examples of that pretty soon. But this is where your main content gets posted. And this, again, can be a page where most of the content's designed to sit for months or a year, or it might be a post where the content is just something that it's more newsy oriented, and the content maybe doesn't last quite as long. So I'm now going to turn it over to Karen Reynolds, who is a volunteer who has done just an amazing amount of work with LakeKit.net. Other than me and our technical service provider in the Twin Cities, Northern Graphics Operations, this program is run completely by volunteers. It was actually created by a Lake leader, Larry Brzezina, and he handed it off to us when it got a little more than he wanted to handle and needed some help, and said, hey, would this make sense for me to give to Wisconsin Lakes? And I jumped at the chance at that because I thought it was a great idea. And Karen's been on our steering committee that whole time and does a great job helping new organizations that need some help learning our editing system and all that kind of stuff. So she's going to talk a little bit about what LakeKit.net is and give you a tour.
Great, thanks, Mike. A very brief intro about me. Like Mike, I went to Lawrence University, got my undergraduate degree there, and I've got an MBA from Rutgers, and I'm a retired CPA, and currently I'm the president of the Gilbert Lake Association. So what the heck is LakeKit.net? What it is a network of Wisconsin Lake Organization websites that, as Mike said, is built on WordPress, and it's a program of Wisconsin Lakes. And what is our mission? It's to help lake organizations and other water groups use internet technology to communicate effectively, which, as he said, has become more and more important over the last month or two. And importantly, we're a member organization, so our members collectively help each other build and maintain their websites without needing any extensive technical knowledge. I had no website background at all prior to joining LakeKit.net, and I found it easy to set up our site, and I find it easy to maintain the website. So each lake organization has an individual and separate WordPress website on the network with its own internet address or URL. And if you currently have a website and you determine at some point that you want to transition to LakeKit, you can keep your current web address. And with LakeKit.net, we have a technical consultant, Mike mentioned him, or network administrator, and he's hired by Wisconsin Lakes, and he takes care of lots of the behind the scenes administrative duties that if you have your own website, you would have to do in order to keep that website up to date. And each individual lake organization website in the network is managed by a person, we call those folks sub-site administrators. And that's somebody who either develops a site using the templates that we've created on LakeKit.net and who keeps the site updated by adding new content, pages, pictures. Or another alternative we have is to have our technical consultant or another outside web designer create the site, and then the sub-site administrator maintains the site. Because they've got fewer administrative duties than with a standalone website, those sub-site administrators can concentrate their attention on providing good content on the site. Next slide. Here is a graphic that shows the structure of LakeKit.net. It's called a multi-site, and that means that it has one installation of WordPress with a number of different sites operating under that one installation, and each of them has its own internet address. What that does is it allows our technical consultant to make updates to all of the sites at the same time, and that's just a huge time savings. Next slide. So why LakeKit.net? First of all, there's a lower expense per site than with a standalone website. The ongoing cost for existing sites is $75 per year for Wisconsin Lakes members and $100 per year for others. I'm working with a water group right now to transition to LakeKit.net, and the cost savings for that group are considerable. The cost to bring on a new site is free for a basic site. There's a setup fee for more complex sites, and that is a one-time fee of $75 for Wisconsin Lakes members and $100 for others. Included in the annual fee are hosting and domain registration, and as I mentioned, existing sites can be transferred, and the data is backed up every day to 2 separate locations in the cloud, and a monthly backup is stored to a 3rd location. That fee includes free SSL, and that stands for Secure Sockets Layer. That's a security technology that establishes a secure encrypted link between a server and a browser, and that's become almost mandatory at this point. And SSL can be a separate fee with many other providers. And also, we include 3 to 4 hours of online screen sharing training for new users. Next slide. So in addition, I've mentioned there are fewer administrative duties with LakeKit.net than with a standalone site because the network administrator handles the back-end work. And that's tasks like keeping the core WordPress files and the plugins updated. Having a WordPress site can be complex if you're on your own, and we take the complexity out of it by doing the technical tasks for you. You've got the ability to design your own site within the framework, and we'll show a couple of examples shortly. The content is built and it's maintained using a flexible but powerful drag and drop editor. You don't need to know any coding at all to build and maintain a LakeKit.net website. Our members are lake associations, lake districts, and also a number of regional organizations like countywide lake groups. And the last point is important, I think. With LakeKit.net, you get a community of other lake organizations, including help from other LakeKit.net members. Next slide. This is a screenshot of the LakeKit.net website. And the next slide, we'll talk about some of those features. The URL is LakeKit.net, and you log in if you're a member. And in the members only section, there are instructions and how-tos, including some video instructions. We have a general guide, and that includes some basic information about WordPress and tips on a number of topics. For LakeKit.net members, we have a forum for asking questions of other members and exchanging ideas with them. There's a contact link for individuals interested in LakeKit.net. And we've got a news feed from several other lake, river, and resource organizations like Wisconsin Lakes and the River Alliance. Next slide. So we're going to take a look at a few LakeKit.net sites. One thing to emphasize, and you'll see that on the next couple of slides, is that the sites look different. It's not a cookie cutter approach. Each site uses the same way of building and maintaining web pages, but they look different. So the next slide. This is a screenshot of the Gilbert Lakes site, and I'll just mention a couple of features for each of the sites that we'll show. This site has the news and events on the home page or landing page, and that's so that members can easily see the most important upcoming information. We added a link on the homepage in March to Wisconsin coronavirus information because that's such an important topic right now. And we have many of our lake residents who live in other states, particularly Illinois. And it's super easy to add something like this to a page and then to delete it when it's no longer needed. We also have a special page and sub-pages devoted to information on high water issues. And that information was added in 2019 because that became such a hot topic. And another feature of this site is that there is a members only page. And that page has a link to the roster of members with addresses, phone numbers, and emails. So that page is password protected so that the personal information is not exposed on the web. And all members are given the password. So take a quick look at this slide and just the look and feel of it, and then go to the next slide. And this is the Rock Lake site. This is a screenshot, and it just shows you how different sites can look. This site also has announcements and meeting information and news on the homepage, but as I said, the look and feel is very different. There is a cool feature. There's a slider in the header that displays different images, which unfortunately you can't see in the screenshot. Another feature of the site is just one of the many features that we offer, and that is there's a link to a YouTube video about the Healthy Lakes program, and the join page on this site has the option to pay membership dues and make contributions online using PayPal. And we're going to show you one last site in the next slide. And this is a look at what we call Model Basic Site 3. And a shout out to Larry Brazina, who I believe is participating in the meeting. He has developed our Model Basic Sites. We had 1.0, 2.0, and now this is 3.0. And this was developed as a template for a very basic website that can then be super easily modified to fit the needs of lake associations, a lake district, or another water group. And what this site has is a home page, and that displays general information and recent news articles. This site has an About Us page that includes a Contact Us form, an events page, a gallery page to display pictures, a records page for posting links to newsletters and minutes and reports and budgets, and a news feed page. And I want to emphasize that these are just examples of possible pages. Every LakeKit website includes the pages that are appropriate and helpful for that particular organization. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mike.
Thanks, Karen. And I see we have a question from Scott asking, saying that we have a town website that we get free that works with WordPress. How can I get some examples of great websites as mine is getting stagnant? Is there a reduced fee for member access just to see ideas and no need for maintenance or effort by your staff? You can actually go to LakeKit.net, and I'm not sure if you can see it on the screenshot that we had.
Yeah, go one more, Mike. Let's see. Oh, go back one, I think, and then click. Oh, nope. No, keep going forward, because I think there's a link right in the PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah.
Right
So,
there.
and we can put that up in the chat box too, so you can find it. But on LakeKit.net, there are links to some of our member sites that you can take a look at for, you know, they're public sites, so there you can go ahead and look at those for free. It's a great way of seeing the different options that LakeKit organizations have used. Not every system that uses WordPress is it uses the same sort of setup. WordPress has different themes, so I think with any theme, you probably can get to similar layouts and things like that. But our technical service provider has used a theme that he feels is pretty malleable, and as you can see, can make sites look completely different from each other. So we'll get back to, if there are more questions, we can get back to them. At the end, I do want to make sure that I get to the other parts of the nodes of that communication network that I was talking about. So you can see how a website can have just a whole lot of information and options and features on it. And really, there's not a lot that you end up having to do to make that happen. It's just so much more powerful than it was you know, not that many years ago. It's so easy to make a site that can really contain a lot of current and changing information, as long as you're able to keep up with making those changes. But once you get that stuff up there, you want to drive traffic to the site so that people will be able to see it. To bring us back again to the conveying information in its current time, like Karen mentioned, the Gilbert Lake Association site has a link to coronavirus information. We actually just had a LakeKit site that was really wanted to make sure that they were able to get their site up and running live for that very reason, because they wanted to be able to post stuff along that line. The advantage of having that kind of information on a website is it's always there and it's always available, and if you've updated it, people can go to the same place to get that current information. With an email, you get the email, and immediately the information in the email, as it ages in time, gets older and older, and so it may be less and less useful because things change. But what you can do is use the information that you're sending out in the email to link to the website, and then the person will that's trying to get this information will get the most up-to-date information. So what often happens, the question I often get about, well, how do I get email sent out, is, you know, how can I do this? We have Gmail or we use Outlook, and there are limitations on the number of addresses that we can put. There are lots of services that you can use, sometimes for free, that won't limit you to the number, or usually the limit of the number of addresses that you can put in a single email is so high that for most organizations it won't matter. The services that get sent out, they're done in a way that they don't necessarily get treated as spam as likely as something sent from a personal email address that has a whole bunch of addresses in it. Um, these services have tracking capability so that you can log into your account. You can usually see how many people opened an email. Sometimes you can see who they were and what they clicked on within an email, which is sometimes freaks people out, but can be awfully useful for the organization. I know I use that feature on the system that Wisconsin Lakes uses. Quite often to find out like how our emails are doing. And for the industry in general for emails, I haven't looked this up in a few years, so maybe this has changed, but an open rate of 30% is actually really high. So if you send out emails and get 30% of the people that get them to read them, even if it's an email that's sent to a dedicated membership, that actually is pretty good. And what that points to is you need to get the information in that one email out in more than one way to ensure that everybody sees it. And again, we're getting back into why that network is important. Another reason that we suggest using one of these email services is that they have built-in security. So they are some of the more secure ways to communicate through the internet um, compared to anything else. And there are a number of different options. Two of the big ones that I've got the logos on the slide for are MailChimp and Constant Contact. Wisconsin Lakes uses MailChimp on the recommendation of Ken at Northern Graphics because he feels it's got good integration with WordPress sites. So you can actually have a plugin to I believe, send things through MailChimp right from your website. Correct me if I'm wrong if that's not how that works, Karen. And it's easy to use. It's got a pretty robust free service. So we recommend MailChimp, but there's nothing that says that Constant Contact or some other service isn't something that's worth looking into as well. So that's email. Now let's talk now a little bit about social media. Of course, there are many, many examples of different social media. I think most people are familiar with Facebook. Twitter, of course, is in the news constantly over the last few years. Instagram has become very popular. That's more of a photo oriented platform. YouTube is great for videos. Snapchat, TikTok, those are kind of the younger groups use those. Snapchat's sort of a quick conversation platform. TikTok is a video platform, and I'm less familiar with those last two. I don't want to pin myself down, but what's similar about all of the social media systems is that you can get information out really quickly. It's easy to create a post. They're usually short. Almost all the systems you're able to put some sort of graphics in, either a video or an image to help enhance the look. So you can get them out. They go immediately out to everyone that is subscribed to your channel or follows you on that platform. And I think in the last few weeks, we've really seen how, if for people that do participate in Facebook, what I've noticed is a lot of people that kind of abandoned it over the last year have come back, because it is a way when we're isolated and disconnected from each other, in this case, because we're told that we have to be physically, that it's a way that we are able to connect in small groups or with broader messages to everyone. And in many cases, these services are ways that people are beginning to get their news, especially for younger generations. They're great platforms most of the time for discussion and getting feedback. So it's not just putting out the message, but there's good ways to comment and respond. So there's that advantage. They are not necessarily for everyone. I know that many parts of Wisconsin still have difficulty with reliable access to internet service that's got enough bandwidth to really handle these sorts of things. Some people have very legitimate privacy concerns with different platforms, and there's certainly that to take into account. And what I have found is social media is not something that you can sort of force people or really cajole people into starting to use. It's something that they have to come to individually, right? So it's not generally something that we think of as a good primary means for an electronic communication setup. Though, if you're a small organization, you don't really have the time or capacity to maintain a website that has a lot of information flowing through it, or maybe you're not big enough or have enough issues that you need to. If everyone on the lake is willing to become part of Facebook and you set up a private Facebook group, that's actually a really good way to get information to a smaller set of people that works quite well, and then maybe your website is more static. The most important thing with Facebook that I'm going to point out is don't ask your grandkid to do it for you, because that won't work. Because one thing about social media is that it is immediate, which means if you're going to do it and have it really work, it needs to be done fairly consistently. And for things to be done fairly consistently, the person doing them has to have a vested interest in what it is that they're posting about. And what I have found is that if you have, if you bring somebody in that says, oh, I'd really like doing social media, I'll keep doing this for you, they'll volunteer for a little while. But unless there's someone that's really involved in the organization, it's probably not going to be very effective. So grandkids, younger people, people that do it, are great ways to sort of learn how it works. But if you're going to do a social media strategy, as an organization, you sort of have to commit to doing it yourself. It's another reason that sometimes it makes it less effective than others. So back to the node diagram again. Again, we have the audience here in the middle with the website as the main hub. I'm going to walk through what I think of as a typical example of how you can use all of the nodes of communication here as effectively. This is sort of the broadest, best case example. It doesn't always work with every piece of communications, and it's not every organization is going to have each system in their toolbox that they use in the same way. Like I said, maybe some organizations aren't going to use social media. But you start out with some sort of post on your website about a piece of news. Let's say that it is Blue Lake has discovered Eurasian water milfoil, and you need to get that information out. So you do information on the website. You can post information about Eurasian water milfoil getting in the lake. What does that mean? What is Eurasian water milfoil? What are we going to do about it? What are the options? That big, long post of information can get posted on the website. Then you can send bullet 2, a paragraph in an email newsletter saying, hey, we've found Eurasian water milfoil. Go to our website. Here's a link in the email directly back to the blog post. So the person may not have seen the website, but they get the information in the email. They get even more information if they go to the website. You can really quickly get that information out if you have active social media. Hey, we have Eurasian water milfoil in our lake, but go to our website for more information. The email newsletter, for people that don't have addresses, you can oftentimes post a link to or the entire newsletter on your social media feed. So there's sort of cross pollination of each node there. And then you're doing a print newsletter. It might be a couple months later, but you can do an update to some degree within your print newsletter. Maybe you decide that it's important enough that you make sure that everybody has a piece of paper in their hand and send out a postcard or a flyer that announces that you have Eurasian water milfoil in the lake. But all of those pieces then again drive back to that post on the website that has more information and that can be updated up to the minute as you get more information and as things change. So even if somebody goes back and says, hey, I remember that there was a post in that email about Eurasian water milfoil, and it says that we just discovered it, but that was 4 months ago. I wonder what's happened. When they click through to the website, they end up on a page that has more up-to-date information. So each piece of this network is working together, driving traffic to this main information repository that is the website. And that is a really powerful way to get communications across in normal times when it's a simple, easy issue that you have months to deal with, and maybe it's not of the greatest importance. You know that you're going to have a lake fair in October, and you start posting information about it to your membership in January or something like that. But it's also a great way to get information out in a time of now, where you need to get information out to people quickly. What's going on at our lake? How are we handling what's happening with the impacts of the stay-at-home orders and things like that? Should I come to the lake? Should I not come to the lake? You can get that posted on a website and then send out links to where people can find that information pretty quickly. So if you're interested in learning more or talking with us about it, you can find out about you might be interested in building a website itself. You might be interested in converting an existing site, developing a communication strategy, or just understanding TikTok. You can use the contact form on LakeKit.net. We've got the link on there again. I can get it in the thing on the chat if it's not in there already, and just you can see the asterisks there. It's probably better to ask your grandkid about understanding TikTok. So that's all I have, and we have a few minutes, I think, to field some questions.
Yeah, we have a couple of minutes, and there were a couple of questions that came in. So one of the questions was, it was from an individual in here who had tried to Google Gilbert Lake Advancement Association and couldn't find your website. Are those individual sites within LakeKit.net? I mean, will they show up on a Google search, or is there a reason why they won't show up?
Yes, there is. The URL is gilbertlakewis.org if you'd like to go to the site. But we built our site only for our association members, not for the world. And so a number of individuals on our lake asked that we not make the site searchable by search engines, not indexed is the phrase. And so we do not index our site because the information is for our members. It's not really so that everyone in central Wisconsin can come and fish on our lake.
And that's actually a good point, Karen, that websites can be tailored and not necessarily locked down. Obviously, if you know what the URL for Gilbert Lake is, you can get to it and see the site, but you can kind of control how much traffic and who gets driven there by different means.
Excellent. Great. So then we also had another question. So what is a timeline for a basic website to get up and running using LakeKit.net?
Sure. So what we normally do, we take, you would do an intake phone call with me, and it can somewhat depend on whether or not there is an existing site that you want ported over into or basically recreated within the LakeKit.net network, or if you don't have anything at all and are just beginning from whole cloth. So if you're starting with one of our basic sites and don't have anything to port over, then we would normally give you some training it's a fairly simple process to get that basic site set up. And then it's really how long does it take you to get content added in there. And again, that's something that we can help with and you would get training on. If there's an existing site, which I would say, I think I'm probably right about this, Karen, maybe the majority of sites so far that we have been existing sites that have moved into LakeKit.net. There, our technical service provider does quite a lot of help in making sure that the parts of the site that you had that you would like to keep are able to be replicated in our system. And that sometimes can take a little bit longer depending on the complexity of what you want done, and also his availability if we are backed up and he does have other clients that he works with.
Okay, excellent. So we're going to go back to the Google question again. Somebody had asked real quick, do either of you know, are most of the sites within the LakeKit.net ungoogleable or not Google searchable?
Most are searchable. Most are
Okay.
searchable. Ours is not, just because that's how we decided to develop it. But it's literally a checkbox in the WordPress settings, and we have the checkbox checked. Do not, it's called discourage search engines from indexing the site, but most sites are searchable.
All right, excellent. Well, we are out of time, and I realize there's a couple questions that are still coming up in the chat box that we don't have time to get to, unfortunately. What'll happen is that those questions will be recorded, and hopefully that we can take some time to answer those after the session is done. Coming up next at 9 o'clock, we want you to join us for our keynote speaker, Lauren Salvato. You can find the Zoom link for that keynote speaker presentation if you go back to the virtual agenda page again, and then following Lauren at 10:45 we'll have concurrent session number 6. So I just want to take a moment again to thank our presenters. Thank you everyone for attending and for all the great questions in this session this morning.
Thank you, Jen and Dan and Karen and Larry, everybody at LakeKit. Thanks so much for helping, and thanks to everybody at UW Extension Lakes for helping make this whole thing go off as well as it has. It's been great.
I second that, and thanks to Stan Smanewski, who's also, or at least for a while, was on the call, because he's a steering committee member too, and he's a great one.
Definitely, definitely.